All right, hello, Jorbs here, and we are looking at run number 2 of my win streak. So the first 2 runs were played in like an after dark session where I was listening to music and the like. And this is the second of those. We recorded audio over the first one as Watcher already. I've taken a couple of days, so I've hopefully recovered from going insane from talking to myself for an hour and a half, and now I'll do it again. Ironclad run, looking immediately at this act, the right side looks like it could be really good to go through if we get strong enough for an elite before campfire and a super elite after, but that's something that you have to like get an immolate for or something from the whale. And it doesn't look like there's that much ability to deviate from that path if we try to go on it and don't get much. Like, we can take a double campfire, double elite path, I guess, but we can't do a huge amount. I could definitely take a 1 HP elite into super elite. Is that what I'm going to do? Looks like I might be trying to do that. We don't necessarily actually get it, but none of the other whale bonuses made a huge difference in this act. Generally pretty happy with Pommel Strike over Thunder Strike and Flame Barrier. Flame Barrier is just a little bit slow in terms of damage at this point in the run. Oh, I remember this. We actually get both elites, don't we? Spoilers. Sorry about that. So if you didn't watch the first run of the streak, one, I feel like you probably should for the sake of completion, but maybe you don't enjoy watch runs or something, sure, I understand. Because the audio for these first 2 runs is going to be like muted and stuff by YouTube because I was playing music, I'm re-recording audio and I can't get into super high level analysis while I'm doing this because I can't like look at what's in my draw pile right now. I can't open up the map whenever I want to, stuff like that. It makes it a little bit harder to really get into what's going on in the run. I can remember vaguely what happened in this run, and I can keep track of stuff somewhat well, but I won't be able to like break something down for 5 minutes. I'm gonna try to give more analysis from a little bit of a step back, talking about the bigger picture of what's going on and stuff like that. In general, so far in this run, we have gotten an incredibly good start. We just got 2 elites, including the super elite, off of our whale bonus, which gave 1 HP fights. We got a very early toxic egg, which coupled with a battle trance made it seem right to me to be taking a Seeing Red Plus, which is pretty fun. You don't often get a Seeing Red Plus early in an Ironclad run. You're just not offered a Seeing Red Plus very early in an Ironclad run. You can't be offered upgraded cards until Act 2. And an unupgraded Seeing Red is typically not good enough. And also, even if you were offered an upgraded Seeing Red, you would still not be super excited about it unless you already had some pretty good card draw, like a Battle Trance, for example. Because you're just going to draw it with cards that aren't worth playing a bunch of the time, and it's going to be taking one of the slots in your hand. But I think this was a perfect example of like best possible case for it. Got an extra 18 damage out of her hand there. So, somewhat strong Ironclad deck already. We greeting with a Defend Plus here. Doesn't really seem necessary. I took the blue key over a blue candle. They're both blue, aren't they? At the Act 1 chest, and I don't often take keys in Act 1 instead of relics, because the blue key is not going to do anything until the end of Act 3, right? But whatever relic I took could potentially do stuff over the course of the run. And so typically you'd much rather take the blue key later in the run than earlier so that you can get a relic which does stuff along the way. Probably a spot weakness plus here, but I'm not entirely sure what boss fight we have and stuff. I'm sure in a Warcry plus. Blue Candle is a relic that I would often be taking in Act 1. Comboed with Necronomicurse out of Act 2, which doesn't happen often. It like happens maybe 5% of the time in Act 2 or something, so a very rare occurrence. But it's just so strong to be able to play Necronomicers. The Necronomicon, the thing where it doubles your first 2 or higher cost attack of the turn every turn, is great. But like with a Feel No Pain and a Juggernaut in play, the thing that Blue Candle and Necronomicers does is actually even stronger. So, the reason that I didn't take it here is because I already had a Toxic Egg and figured that I could already get ludicrous scaling out of my Toxic Egg. Be able to build a deck with lots of really cool skills and stuff. And I figured it was probably better to be settling for a relic that has less potential upside, but also less chance of just whiffing and doing nothing over the course of the run, which is what might happen if I take the blue candle. So I'm imagining that like in Act 3, maybe I pick up an oddly smooth stone. And sure, it wouldn't have been that bad to lose an oddly smooth stone. It's not a relic that's going to do an incredible amount. But maybe on average, this is a run where I'd rather have an oddly smooth stone than a blue candle. I'd rather have an oddly smooth stone in Act 3 than a blue candle in Act 1 in this run, because I don't think I really need the high roll potential of the blue candle when I have such an early Toxic Egg. That was my thinking. I think if I make it to Act 3 with a Toxic Egg, I guess that's the flip side, is that the Necronomicon comes online in Act 2, whereas the third relic won't get opened from that chest until Act 3, right? I would actually have a few floors where the blue candle was doing something while the blue key wasn't that were pretty relevant, and they might be earlier than when Toxic Egg kicks in. I don't know. Anyway, I think you can probably go either way in a spot like that, and definitely sometimes I take blue candle and sometimes I don't, and it's based on what else is going on in the run and how likely it seems to me that blue candle will end up being a big deal. Unfortunately, we don't get to play uppercut here, but you know, we're very healthy in this Hexaghost fight. Getting the strike dummy is quite nice. Our deck doesn't do that much damage for Act 2 Elite stuff, and we don't have any of the things that are super unfair against Act 2 Elites yet. We don't have a Disarm for Book of Stabbing, we don't have a Shockwave for Slavers. So the strike dummy is nice as damage, which is very relevant in an Act 2 Elite fight sort of way. It's not very relevant in like a heart fight sort of way. Probably once we get to the heart fight, it's not that big a deal that we have a strike dummy. But when we're trying to kill Red Slaver in the Slavers fight before we get hit with vulnerable, strike dummy is a really big deal. That extra 6 damage or whatever that we're going to get matters quite a lot in that situation. Right now the deck looks like it's able to go through Act 2 somewhat aggressively. It's not a deck that gets to take 4 elite fights with no campfires or anything, but it can definitely do like a 2 campfire, 2 elite path. And with the Toxic Egg, we already have something lined up for making it strong enough to win the run after that. So, looking like a pretty good start to the run. Like, I feel like I'm playing this Act 1 better than I played the Act 4 on Watcher that I watched it a couple of days ago, but it's still pretty fresh in my mind in run 1 of this streak. I wonder if that's just because I figured out already won, so I stopped paying attention in Act 4. Or maybe it's because Act 1 is just a lot simpler than Act 4, like there aren't that many cards in your deck. Most of the interactions with relics and cards are pretty limited. so there's a lot less to think about in terms of exactly which card you're going to play and which order to play them and stuff. I think taking feed at the end of Act 1 is very, very commonly correct if you are offered feed at the end of Act 1. I don't have too much to say about that. Looks like I took a Fusion Hammer, which makes sense with Toxic Egg. I think the other option was Choker, right? Choker was the main other option there, and the problem with Choker is that we already have a Warcry as Seeing Red. Let me make sure that it actually was. Yeah, or Philostone. Philostone's problematic because we will take more damage if we grab it. We don't have a reliable way to weaken enemies. We just got one uppercut. We don't block very well. We don't have block in our relics other than Ornamental Fan. It's just not a situation where Philostone is particularly appealing. If we had a few more defensive relics and maybe a Shockwave and a Disarm or something, all of a sudden I feel like Philostone's pretty exciting to take. But even then, a Fusion Hammer with a Toxic Egg is going to be pretty solid. A Sword Boomerang. So I guess I was feeling like I still needed a little bit more damage against... I wonder if the Sword Boomerang's already pointed at the Act 2 boss fight, actually. I have a spot weakness, like any True Grit Plus or Burning Plaque Plus is going to help me play that spot weakness multiple times. Might be. It might be the case that I just took Sword Boomerang there, not really thinking that it was such a great card at the moment, but thinking that I could afford to have it in my deck for its potential later. The flip side is maybe I thought that I needed the strength scaling attack for like Book of Stabbing Fight. Book of Stabbing Fight in particular, I could see it being good, and I don't know. It's hard to reconstruct what exactly past Jorbs was thinking, but certainly in a deck with spot weakness and reliable vulnerable, it's not going to be too bad to take a Sword Boomerang. Feed begins. One unfortunate downside to Fusion Hammer is it makes it difficult to upgrade feed. Not necessarily impossible. We could pick up an Armaments, for example, and upgrade it inside fights before we play it. We could also get an upgrade on it from an event at some point, although it's fairly likely that we'll have something else that would be better to upgrade. Remove Sword Boomerang. I guess we're going to remove a Strike Plus. Yeah, they're dealing 12 damage for one enemy to a specific target, where Sword Boomerang is dealing 9 damage to random enemies for 1 energy. So it's a little bit weird to take out Strike Plus right now. But Sword Boomerang, I assume, was picked because of the scaling for longer fights, so makes sense to want to hold on to it. Is this a red key? Do we just take red key here and get all 3 keys on floor 23? Oh, we're not even going to go to the campfire. Okay, sure, that makes sense to me. So this way we get a hallway fight instead of a floor where we do nothing other than pick up red key. Hallway fight has extra value because we have feed in the deck. Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. It made sense to me a while ago, too. Gremlin leader fight tends to be super fun. There are just a lot of creative ways that you can get through this fight, killing or not killing different minions, manipulating the Gremlin leader AI. The Gremlin leader does different things depending on how exactly you're killing the minions. Also, the Gremlin leader often has AI which either chooses to buff or attack, or chooses either to summon or attack. There are turns where you can guarantee that Gremlin Leader will do a certain thing, but because you're often looking at either a turn where Gremlin Leader does nothing or a turn where Gremlin Leader like attacks you for 30 plus, you end up having some like more impactful decisions. Whereas if Gremlin Leader just always attacks you for 18 and does something else a little bit impressive, your decisions matter a lot less. It doesn't matter if you line up a turn where you can't block with that, because like whatever, you take 18 damage, big deal. But if you line up a turn where you can't block with a turn where you get attacked for 36, now that's starting to be a much more significant thing. So I really very much enjoy the Gremlin Leader fight. It's a fight that's rewarding for decks which are able to like adapt to what happens on each turn in a lot of different ways. So I went ahead and bottled Uppercut. Bottling Uppercut is not the most exciting thing in the world. I think that I was more inclined to do it because I have a Dropkick in my deck. Dropkick's not a card that I prioritize taking very highly as a general rule, but in this situation, I took a Dropkick because I wanted to be able to beat Hexaghost with it, right? Is that correct? I don't remember exactly how I got a Dropkick, honestly. I'm a viewer of this run in the same way that you are. But seeing the way that the deck is developing, it's fairly likely that I do want to hold on to that Dropkick. It's fairly likely that I want to play it a lot of times in the boss fight at the end of the act. And these are things that make bottling an Uppercut a little bit more appealing, because getting the vulnerable onto enemies early in the fight is a bigger deal as well. Usually Uppercut on turn 1, you don't care a lot about the weak you don't care a lot about the vulnerable on turn 1 for Uppercut in a lot of the later game fights, because a lot of the later game fights you sort of get set up and then you deal your damage. You don't try to deal your damage starting right from turn 1. But when you have Dropkick, all of a sudden the vulnerable does matter because it draws you cards, and drawing cards helps you get that setup going. And then maybe I should probably, yeah, it's worth mentioning. So vulnerabling things on turn 1 is a big deal in like Act 2, like where we are right now. So if you ever get Bottled Flame offered to you in Act 1, for example, and maybe you just have your Bash Plus upgraded from the start of the run. I remember it took me a really long time to work that out during the run as well. But yeah, I'm pretty sure putting Havoc on top makes sense there. It's actually probably good to upgrade Bash and bottle it until you get to like the second half of Act 2 or so. And then from the second half of Act 2 onward, the Bash just gets worse and worse and worse and worse, because the cards that you're putting in your deck are so much better than it. And also because the damage profile of your deck usually stops being so linear and starts being multiplicative, so you're not really dealing that much damage with Vulnerable on turn 1 compared to how much damage you could deal on turn 8 by the time that you get to Act 4. But yeah, this is a situation with Dropkick, and Uppercut also weakens things, which is actually quite useful. It's useful to get weak down on the heart on turn 1. Stuff like that. Birds and Cultists. So you're up to an Evolve. Evolve's just like an okay card. It's nothing incredible in a lot of situations, but then there are situations like this one where all of a sudden we don't have to worry about choking on dazes, because every time we draw a daze, it draws us an extra card. Once you get into super late game fights, Evolve's usually good for a good amount of card draw. It turns on like cards like Power Through. It's a card which, if you're in a situation where you're not about to die, has fairly good potential upside for later. If you are in a situation where you're about to die, maybe don't take it. But here, for example, Power Through Plus is suddenly an incredibly good card because of that evolve that we grabbed. Burning Pact Plus, I think, is even better in our situation. We have a spot weakness and a sword boomerang, where we want to play the spot weakness a lot to get our sword boomerang killing bosses. We also have a drop kick, where we can try to play that drop kick a lot to get through boss fights. Drop kick is a card which is often enough for an Act 2 boss fight, but doesn't quite get things done for Act 3 and 4 boss fights. It just like gets to a point where it's being outshone. Unless you end up going for a full infinite with it, which does happen sometimes, I guess. Cool. We have had a strong enough deck and a fusion hammer such that our potions are just sort of like there. Haven't really had much reason to use them recently. And that's a good place to be. If you get to not use your potions, you get to just keep on optimizing them to be perfect for the fights where you do need them. So we've got a blood potion, which will be a huge amount of sustain later in the run, because we keep on feeding, and blood potion gives HP based on our max HP. So every time we feed, our blood potion starts to go up and up and up and up, even more and more in value. By the time we get to the heart, if we're still holding on to that, it's going to be another like 30 health or whatever for that heart fight. And then our other potion, we can just grab whatever potion seems most relevant for whatever thing seems most dangerous in the near future. We're starting to get to the point where like something like an exploding potion for Reptimancer might be a pretty good idea, because we don't have any AoE damage in our deck. And like, that's fine. If we're in a situation where our deck is quite strong, and so we don't need to use potions and just like random hallway fights or whatever, then just having potions that are very good for the situations where our deck isn't that strong is going to be fine. There's also a campfire after this fight, so unless we were to find shovel or something like that, we're just going to be resting at the next floor anyway. This is a situation where our potions are actually doing exactly what we need them to by just sitting in our potion belt not doing anything. That's exactly what we want from our potions right now. We just want to have the best potion belt possible later. And Liquid Memories is really good. Blood Potion's going to get better and better and better, and is already okay. So that's what we're getting out of them here. Maybe this is actually a decent time to talk more in depth about potions. This is something that people ask me to talk about in depth a lot, but it's like really hard to make a Spire side chat on the subject, and really hard to talk about it in detail while I'm going through a run. Something to think about with potions though, and I'll try to make like a 5-minute point rather than something crazy. Often in this game, you're not sure how difficult it's going to be to go through a hallway fight or an event where enemies, like the arena event or something like that, or an elite fight, you can't tell ahead of time if you're going to take like 5 damage or 35 damage. And if you got 36 health and you're confident that you're going to take between 5 damage and 35 damage, maybe that's not such a big deal. But if you have 30 health and you're not sure if you're going to take between 5 damage and 35 damage, all of a sudden that does start becoming a pretty big deal, because all of a sudden you're risking losing by going to that floor that you want to be able to go to. And so one very, very valuable thing that potions do is they try to reduce the uncertainty involved in getting a really bad draw in a fight. If you don't have to worry about potentially losing 35 health in an Act 2 Elite fight anymore because you have a good potion, all of a sudden you get to path more aggressively through Act 2 and take another Elite fight and get another relic and stuff like that. And so the thing that's like sort of counterintuitive sometimes with potions and can be pretty tricky is that using a potion to like just grab a little bit of health in a fight, like say I can use an explosive potion and save myself 10 health or something like that. If there's a fight coming up, like Slavers, for example, and I think worst case scenario, without the explosive potion, I could take 50 damage, but worst case scenario with the explosive potion, I could take 30 damage. It can really very, very, very much be correct to be holding on to the explosive potion, even though on average, I think it probably saves me less than 10 health in the Slavers fight. The thing is, that really bad worst case scenario is the one that I have to care about because it's the one that can actually kill me. And this is there are many, many situations in life where analyzing something by what it does on average just doesn't really work. And this is one of those situations where I'd rather have an average output of plus 5 HP out of that explosive potion in the Slavers fight than an average output of plus 10 HP in the hallway fight beforehand, if it cuts down on that worst case scenario in the Slavers fight enough that I get to safely take that path through the act. So that's the beginnings of talking about potions. But then from there you have to start asking more and more complicated questions about exactly how valuable is going this direction through the act instead of that direction through the act, and how valuable is it to reduce your chance of dying in this hallway fight when you still have some chance of dying over the course of the run, and maybe reducing your chance of dying in this hallway fight cost you a higher chance of dying somewhere else. There are definitely situations where you want to use a potion in a hallway fight for 10 health or whatever. But there are other situations where you might want to hold on to that potion in the same situation where it gives you the same amount of health because later on in the run something about your pathing ends up being different and you just need that potion for then. So if I remember right, it was like 4:30 a.m. or something, and I thought I was going to be able to go infinite with dropkick here. And I cannot go infinite with dropkick in this situation. Not even a little bit. So this got a little bit weird. I think I don't know if accidentally is quite the right word because I've spent such a long time playing Slay the Spire at this point that my intuition's like generally pretty good about what I should do. But okay, up until right then, I think I was actually doing like mostly reasonable things. I think playing the sword boomerang probably made a bit more sense though. Another thing about the potions that isn't always obvious to people is because you can heal at campfires or between acts or things like that, drinking a blood potion here, like I'm facing 54 incoming damage, I have 55 health. You might think, oh my gosh, this is getting really dangerous, let's drink the blood potion so we have a buffer of health. If I get through the fight and get to the next act, I heal for 3/4 of my missing health, which means that I lose 3/4 of the value of the blood potion in that situation if I drank it when I don't need to. So that's one thing that I see people who are newer to Slay the Spire, maybe they're like experienced with other card games, but aren't very used to managing the potion type resource that happens in Slay the Spire. That's one thing that I see some people struggling with a little bit, is understanding that. So we're going to take a bunch of damage and then we're going to be completely fine. Collector has attacked us pretty hard, but it turns out that we have 16 strength and stuff. Not really a big deal. I believe what I was thinking about here was whether I could feed or not in the fight. So in a situation like this, the simplest way to work it out is just look at what's the worst possible hand that you can get next turn, and like, can that hand kill you? And if the worst possible scenario, so you have to like be comfortable enough going through the iterations of cards you might draw to be able to correctly identify the worst possible situation. But then once you do work out the worst possible situation, if it turns out that even in the worst possible situation, like sure, I go to 1 health, but I still survive and I get to feed, it's worth it to hold on to feed there. And it's generally going to be worth doing the math and working out exactly how that looks. We do have like very close to an infinite. Like close enough that we can do a bunch of stuff until Collector dies here. But if Collector had another 1000 HP, we would not have successfully killed Collector because we would have run out of cards with Burning Pact, and also we were spending 1 energy per cycle through the deck there. Feed Barricade Brutality. Barricade's a really interesting card. I feel like it's easy to feel very comfortable analyzing whether Barricade is good in your deck if you're trying to kill with Body Slams and have an Entrench. It's like, yeah, of course Barricade's good. But Barricade, when you don't have much intention of like making 500 block, is a much more interesting card to me, trying to work out whether you want it or not. I think that with Captain's Wheel, Barricade goes up quite a lot in value. The general thing that you're looking for with Barricade is you're looking for a deck which can't consistently make the right amount of block every turn. And it's actually somewhat unusual for a deck to be able to make the right amount of block each turn, especially when you consider that like there are fights in the game like the Heart fight, where the Heart attacks you for 61 turn and then 0 the next turn. It would be really weird for your deck to be able to make 60 block 1 turn and 0 the next turn consistently. So Barricade ends up often being like pretty good value in decks later on in the run, even if they're not decks that are super centered around making a ton of block because of that. One of the most unique runs I ever played on Ironclad was a run where I just went like very, very, very heavily committal to perfected strikes. And I think I had 4 or 5 perfected strikes or something. And this was legitimately a run where I just sort of smorked my way through the run. And I took a Barricade in like Act 3 or something in this deck. I think the deck had like 3 block cards total. I had been removing defense. And trying to explain why the Barricade was good there was very challenging for me. And it was... Sometimes as a Slay the Spire player, you have things which you try to explain and then people disagree with you. Which is, you're allowed to disagree with me, right? But it is a like unique sort of problem where if I know that something is right and then I explain why it's right and somebody disagrees with me, I feel like I like failed them or like my explanation wasn't good enough or something like that. But the situation in that run was like I think I had one impervious, maybe like one other somewhat big block card. Um, I had a self-forming clay, and I was offered a barricade. I'm pretty sure I'm at least close to representing that correctly. And in that situation, looking at the run I was playing, a very significant amount of the time that I die in that run, it's because the heart multi-attacks me after it does the big attack, and then self-forming clay goes off a ton of times from the multi-attack. I start the next turn with like 45 block maybe from self-forming clay, but it's not the turn where the heart attacks me. And so all of the block goes away and I don't get any value out of it whatsoever. And so in the lines where it was likely that I was going to die in that run, Barricade was going to be able to make me 30 plus block for 3 energy because I was going to get to play it and hold on to that self-forming clay block from the Heart's multi-attack. And I went through the run. I ended up winning the Heart fight. I ended up not having that situation come up, and Barricade basically made me no block. And then I had so much trouble trying to explain to people like what the point of Barricade had been. That's actually one that's like on YouTube now, and I still get comments asking about it a year later or something. And so the general idea is that Barricade can be good if you're trying to make tons of block, but a lot of the time, if you have a deck which consistently makes a ton of block, Barricade actually doesn't really do much at all. If you consistently outblock the enemies in the game, what's the point of having Barricade? Like, it makes it so you consistently outblock them by even more, but why? What? You don't need to, right? Because you could already outblock the enemies. So Ironclad has Entrench, which makes Barricade good in that situation because it like multiplicatively increases how much you can outblock the enemies by, which starts to help you out in fights like against the Heart. All of a sudden you don't have to worry about ever dying to the Heart just about. The Ironclad has Body Slam, or you can maybe use Body Slam as a damage card and run like that if you have a Barricade, and sure, that makes some sense. So there are some reasons why you might care about it and run like that. But if you're in a run where you can't consistently block for as much as you're getting attacked for, but sometimes you can block for a lot, that's actually a situation where Barricade is like incredibly valuable. And you don't need to condition that on anything else, really. Like, just the words I said there are enough. You're in a run where sometimes you make a ton of block on a turn, other times you don't make any block on a turn. It's really easy to see from there why being able to hold on to your block between turns would help out, because if you made a ton of block but weren't getting attacked, that block would still be around for next turn when you did get attacked and couldn't make any block. So all this is to say that at the end of Act 2 there, I took a Barricade that I'm not sure that everybody would be taking. Well, I'm sure that not everybody takes Barricade there, but I think even amongst people who have a lot of experience playing the game at Ascension 20 and going for heart kills, I'm not sure that people are always realizing the maximal value that they can get out of Barricade in a situation like that, where it just doesn't really look like Barricade is that good in that situation, I think, and you have to put in some work trying to find the reasons why it is good. The upside of taking Barricade on top of the like marginal value that we could get out of it already is that it does open up ways to scale for the end of the game, which we don't exactly have yet. But Barricade plus Entrench for block scaling is one thing we could do. Another thing we could maybe still do is like a Feel No Pain Corruption sort of thing, in which case having Barricade is quite valuable because that's the sort of deck that can make a billion block all at once, but then all of its skills are exhausted, so it can't make any block anymore. Cool. This has been my conversation about Barricade. I hope you enjoyed it. So we talked about potions and we talked about Barricade. I'm doing like Spire side chat sorts of things with this run at the moment. Things seem to be going generally well. The Snecko, ooh. I am surprised I played that attack and risked getting a curse there. That's weird. Maybe we're getting toward the bedtime part of this run. I definitely went straight to sleep when the run ended. And that time I didn't play other attacks? I'm so confused by how I'm playing this fight right now. So confused. I wonder how much Snecko changes how this fight is looking when we pick it up at the end of Act 2, how this run is looking. One thing that Snecko does when we pick it up at the end of Act 2 here is it turns off the ability to go infinite with Dropkick. We could have like found another Dropkick and then exhausted down to just 2 Dropkicks, and at that point we have an infinite going. And that could have been how we won the run. We already had an Ornamental Fan, and so probably if we get a relic like Sozu perhaps from the Act 2 boss fight, that actually ends up happening a significant amount of the time. Significant? How much is a significant amount of the time? Like 20% of the time to win the run? Maybe even more than that. It's not something that you ever do against the Act 4 Elite, really, and if your deck's strong enough to kill the Act 4 Elite and to go infinite against the Heart, then you usually have some flexibility in how you kill the Act 3 bosses. Like, there are usually a couple of different strategies which would be good enough. So it's not really like when I say that there's like a 20 to 30% chance that that's how we win the run. I'm saying that we build a deck that always tries to go infinite straight away or something like that. It's not like I'm saying, well, we also need to get lucky and not get Time Eater because we'd have no way of beating Time Eater. It's more a thing where sometimes you have a run that would be lost unless you had access to a certain tool. And I think that maybe if we picked up a Sozu at the Act 2 boss fight, like 20 to 30% of the runs that we win, we would have lost unless we had access to the infinite involved in Dropkick. So I'm trying to like quantify how large of a part it is of our overall chance to win sort of thing, maybe. And that goes away when we pick up Snecko for sure. That's one of the most significant ways that picking up Snecko can be bad in my experience is if it turns off your infinite combos. All the characters have some ways to go infinite, and Snecko tends to kill them. And sometimes, depending on how your deck is looking, that can be a bigger deal than others. We don't really have a ton of stuff that makes Snecko great in this deck either. It's just that Snecko is always great. are almost always great. The extra card draw is very good. If we had like 3 offerings, then maybe we wouldn't be taking Snecko because the card draw wouldn't be quite as important. But we certainly don't have 3 offerings, and Ironclad runs tend to be pretty low on card draw, even with the Evolve and the Battle Trance. Our deck does not draw enough cards to be happy. Interesting. I don't feel like I had to blow the feed there. Second Wind goes up in value with the Snecko. Also with Evolve. Got a pretty nice combo there. Also with the Barricade. Second Wind's like actually it's a perfect example of a deck with Second Wind in it is going to sometimes be able to make an incredibly large amount of block because it like draws Second Wind plus some wounds or whatever. And other times it won't be able to make much block at all. If you draw Second Wind and 6 attacks, that's a lot less block than if you draw Second Wind and 5 statuses and 4 skills or something. So, another reason to be excited about Barricade to smooth that out. Cards like Barricade, those expensive powers that don't necessarily do anything right when you put them in play. Do I need to do that? That struck me as unnecessary. Maybe I have elite fights coming up or something, or maybe my draw pile was worse than I thought. Yeah, I don't know. I've also managed to forget what I was just saying, so apologies about that. Probably something about Snecko or Barricade. Oh, the big powers. Okay. So, when you're looking at a Barricade or a Demon Form or whatever, those are powers you have to be able to put into play and then get some value out of for them to be worth having in your deck. Deva Form, Demon Form, Echo Form, all the forms. Dead Branch, that seems like a good relic. When you're looking at those powers and trying to decide whether to take them or not, one of the biggest things to influence your decision is how good your relics are at making you extra output on turn 1, 2, and 3. More so turn 1 and turn 2 than turn 3. But at that Act 2 decision, I don't think I would have been taking Barricade without the Captain's Wheel. Captain's Wheel sort of hits both halves of Barricade. It makes it easier to put a 3-cost power into play early in a fight, and it also means that there's automatically going to be that one turn on turn 3 where we make a lot of block and we don't necessarily have anything to do with it. So having Captain's Wheel made the Barricade pickup a lot more appealing too. There isn't necessarily one easy way to say everything about whether to take Barricade in that fight situation or not. Unfortunately. There's just sort of a lot of stuff to think about, especially once you get into the second half of a run of Slay the Spire. There's so much going on with what your deck does on different turns and different fights, and trying to identify what the things it's worst at are and how you're going to most expediently improve them to a point where they're not going to kill you. Or if your deck's like really bad at killing Reptimancer, maybe you just have to play Act 3 hoping that you don't run into Reptimancer. Maybe you can't solve that problem and you have to just get a little bit lucky. I don't know what Twitch chat is up to. So, trying to get the feed off at the end of this fight. Very normal stuff. Didn't end up finding an armaments or getting a feed upgrade, so the blood potion isn't worth quite as much as it could have been, maybe. Getting a disarm plus is utterly and totally insane there. Disarm plus is usually, I would say, your most important defensive card against Awakened One, Time Eater, and the Heart, if you're playing an Ironclad run. And that's a lot of the endgame fights. Card's very, very, very good. Unfortunately, our deck doesn't do very well with AoE damage. It hasn't at any point in the run and still doesn't. We've got a Dead Branch now, so I guess any card that exhausts might end up being AoE damage, and we also have perhaps enough front-loaded damage that we don't even need AoE damage necessarily. It's really interesting reading Twitch chat without knowing what the conversation actually is. I actually find that sort of fascinating. Maybe we're talking about if there were a Slay the Spire movie, and I'm saying, or we're saying, that like the gameplay would be portrayed really poorly, because that's the tendency in movies about games. Don't know. Oh, the feed upgrade. Wait, I didn't go for it? Oh, that's too bad. It does seem completely unreasonable to go for the feed upgrade there, in fairness. But I'm still allowed to be upset, I think. You can be upset too if you would like. This is just lethal, I think. It wasn't? Maybe it was, but I decided I didn't want it because I wanted to feed. Maybe it was a bit short. Maybe it was like 10 damage short or something. Hard to... When you're weak and the enemy is vulnerable and you have strength and stuff, like, there are all these modifiers to how much damage the cards do, where it becomes a little bit harder to just look at your hand and tell exactly how much damage you're dealing, in my experience. I guess the weak and the vulnerable sort of cancel each other out. It's interesting to think that I think a lot of people starting out Slay the Spire, maybe you don't skip Dead Branch like the first run of Slay the Spire that you ever play, but there are a lot of people who like arrive at the belief that Dead Branch is a bad relic after maybe playing like a couple of runs of Slay the Spire, because it makes a bunch of random cards, and that could lead to you having a really bad hand because you had gotten so many random cards. Where the actual thing going on is that, for the most part, the cards for the characters are pretty good. Like, most of them are playable, and also it puts them in your hand. So it's like drawing 30 good cards for free every fight or something, which when you phrase it like that sounds a lot better. But Dead Branch is a relic that people fall into analytical traps with and end up thinking is maybe not so great. And then Snecko Eye is also one of those relics. I think Snecko is one where even if you're a completely brand new player to the game, you might read it and see that it's debuffing you with this confused thing and think, oh, that doesn't sound very good. And so it's interesting to sit here looking at Snecko and Dead Branch, which are definitely among the top five relics in the game, and think about how there are some people who would not have taken either of those. And try to work out like what's the simplest way to explain to somebody who doesn't recognize why those are good that they are good, you know? Sometimes the stuff that's obvious to someone who's played a lot of the game at a high level isn't that obvious to somebody who's like pretty new to the game. And because you don't necessarily have that much shared experience with a person like that, because they're still learning some of the fights and learning how different things go and learning lots of stuff about how good different cards are and stuff. Sometimes when you have a conversation with them about why something is good or bad, you're coming at it with very different assumptions, and you can end up miscommunicating quite a lot and failing to get your points across in a good way and stuff like that. I think I just made it so I couldn't feed this turn. Oh. Wait. Oh, okay. I was like, I can put feed on top with Warcry, and then I didn't put it on top with Warcry, and I was very concerned. But yeah, the anger was good enough. Battle Trance is an interesting card here with Snecko. It's my tendency with Snecko is not to take a lot of cards that are exclusively creating card draw for you. And the reason for that, this is another really tough one. I think the way that I would explain the reason for that would be that when I have a Snecko, I'm not often having to spend that much energy on card draw because I have so much from Snecko. So what does card draw do? One thing is it puts more cards in your hand, right? That's a very abstract and removed idea of what it does. And maybe when you're starting out in the game, that's like the first thing you're thinking about is like drawing 10 cards would be better than drawing 5 cards. So card draw must be good. I think the next step is working out that card draw lets you spend energy on the things you want to spend energy on every turn. And so then when you're analyzing Snecko, it might be like you're looking at your chance to draw good block cards or something, and you're looking at the card Acrobatics, and you're like, well, Acrobatics would, on average, give me the ability to draw more block cards, so it's good for my block. But I think there are 2 pitfalls with that. The first pitfall is how much block you make on average is not the thing that you care about with block. You care about the distribution of block that you make. So if that Acrobatics could just be a leg sweep or something like that, and maybe it can, in fairness, but if I just draw a leg sweep and it costs 3, I can play leg sweep for free, for 3, in a Snecko run pretty regularly, and it's fine. I won't make 50 block that turn probably, but you know, I will make 13 or whatever. And so the acrobatics is not as good at guaranteeing a base level of output as a card that gives you one of the commonly required outputs in the game. Oh my gosh, that card reward screen. Like I'd probably just take disarm here, right? I don't know. So that's one thing. Another thing is that in the first turns of a fight, the cards that you need to draw are those cards that are going to help you scale and do a lot of stuff over the course of a run, like Barricade, for example, or Demon Form, or whatever. You want to draw those and put them into play. And the thing is, if I put a card like Acrobatics or another Battle Trance or whatever in my deck, and it costs like 2, and I draw a hand where I want to play it, if I draw Barricade or Demon Form off that and they cost 3, I can't play them for the entire first cycle of my deck. So drawing cards when you don't have enough energy to play the really important cards that you have in your deck has an inherent danger associated with it. And yeah, maybe those are 2 important things to be thinking about with analysis like that. I've honestly never sat down and really thought deeply about how I would explain that before. I just like have noticed over playing the game that a card like Acrobatics or Battle Trance just doesn't really play very well with Snecko. So it might be that there's some other stuff going on that I'm not really communicating very well because I haven't thought about it too consciously. But definitely a consistent experience that I have when I play decks with Snecko is that a card like Battle Trance just isn't a very good card in them. And I think the things that I just talked about are at least getting close to explaining why. Oh my gosh, are we gonna get to play? No. Almost though. We almost got to play Clash. Excuse me, sorry about that. I've noticed that when I record these, just over the last 2, I've noticed that I talk a lot more actually. I think that when I'm playing a run, I'm very comfortable like taking my time and being quiet and thinking about stuff. But when I'm recording commentary over a run that I played before, I feel like I have to be like talking all the time or people are going to get bored. So I do apologize if these runs are not as much fun as seeing the ones where I was talking about what was going on as I was playing them. It's just, this is the best solution in this case, I think, based on what happened. I'm gonna get the feed off here. This is one of those situations where there's absolutely no reason not to feed in this fight other than your respect for your own time. Like, there's no possible way that the Darklings are getting through 81 block here with Barricade in play. So I'm not going to take damage. It's just a matter of, am I okay with sitting around long enough to draw the feed in a scenario where I can kill the last Darkling with it? If you're confused about why I didn't just play it on a different Darkling earlier, you have to hit the last Darkling with feed for it to do anything. All the fatal cards have to hit the last Darkling. They don't do anything if you hit the not last Darkling. This is an interesting game design puzzle, I think. Trying to work out how to make an interesting game without ever putting a player in a situation like that. The main difficulty is usually that it's not that you can't think of rules that would stop it from happening. Like, you could make it so feed only worked on turn 1, 2, or 3, for example, and then the player would never be in a situation like that with feed anymore. It's not hard to come up with rules like that at all. It's hard to communicate those rules in a way that is succinct and makes sense, is more what's going on. And a lot of the time in game design, you end up not finding a good rule like that you can make, and just being left with the thing where sometimes the player spends 5 minutes trying to get a feed off at the end of a fight, and it's sort of boring. I don't really think there's any, like, there's no perfect solution to that at all. I wish there was. My experience with, like, game design sort of stuff is more in XCOM type games. If you don't know what XCOM is, it's a squad-based, turn-based tactics game. So you have a squad of soldiers and they fight against a different squad, basically, is the idea. It's a single-player game for the most part, and so your squad is fighting against the AI, which has its own soldiers. Gets compared to chess a lot. And XCOM is a game where some of the stuff that happens mechanically is hidden and not very discoverable for the player at all. Imagine if, like, in Slay the Spire, the way that the map was generated was very important, but you never got told how it worked. So, even more than it is right now, like, sometimes the map would generate with 8 elites and sometimes the map would generate with 1 elite, but it wouldn't be communicated clearly to the player which one was going to happen. XCOM has a little bit of stuff like that in it. And so with XCOM, one thing you can do is you can use the fact that some of the rules are a bit obscured to sort of bullshit stuff. Like, you could just make it so feed doesn't work if people spend a long time trying to get feed to work, and the reason could just be like, well, it makes more narrative sense if it doesn't, or something ludicrous like that. Why didn't I play power through there? Did I not have enough energy? It doesn't matter at this point anyway. So sometimes you can sort of do stuff like that. Yeah, sometimes it works alright, other times it doesn't work so great. I don't know, I don't think there's one perfect solution to it all. It's certainly something that I've thought about a lot, because I've spent a lot of hours of my life doing things like looking for feed for 5 minutes at the end of a fight. And it's not really what I want to spend my life doing. Morning. So, time meter's dead. I've noticed that when I am playing a run of Slay the Spire, the Act 3 and 4 gauntlet is often very intense for me, and I'm thinking a lot. And when I am watching myself play a run of Slay the Spire, the Act 3 and Act 4 gauntlet is like, well, one, I already know that I win. So it's not like I'm sitting here with bated breath wondering what happens. But also, from the seat that I'm in at the moment, it's pretty hard for me to get really invested in the decision making because I can't like look at my draw pile and stuff like that. So I'm just sort of like here. I wonder what this is like for viewers most of the time. I imagine if you're watching a run live, it could be really exciting because you're not sure whether or not the run's going to be a win. I imagine that if you're watching on YouTube and it's already been spoiled, whether it's a win or not, it could be a little bit less exciting. Don't know. Looking for feed again, of course, of course. I'm actually like not blocking for enough at all. Dead Branch does eventually fill your deck with a bunch of random cards, and we have, toward the end of this Time Eater fight, started to get to the point where our deck has a bunch of random cards in it. Yeah, it's actually worth it to take 10 damage here to look for the feed still. And then we can play a second wind and keep looking for the feed. There's no requirement that we leave the fight on full health. I don't have Pantograph, but I do have plenty of health to survive any of the other Act 3 bosses here. Oh, I remember this mistake. I didn't realize that the clock was on 11, and then I made it so I couldn't play feed. And then I got very upset. Did I then, I wonder if I then went all the way through my deck again to find a feed again or not. Yeah, I just wasn't actually paying attention. Oh, no, we just play feed and then get it back with Exhume. Although, if Exhume costs more than 1, we couldn't do that. We got a bit lucky. Anyway, yeah, that was not great. But, well, at some point, if you've been waiting for feed for 5 minutes, I think maybe it's a test of endurance. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's actually good game design. Does this fight matter in any way? I have a fusion hammer. It's hard to imagine how anything about this fight could possibly matter. Okay, the way it can matter is I can get so unlucky on Dead Branch that I actually, like, die, maybe. That's the way that it matters. Like, if I play Second Wind Plus every time I draw it and then get only flexes. and then my deck is just like 30 flexes and a few attacks. Yeah, that could be pretty bad. It's funny. So, I guess I should probably be trying to maximize stuff here. The chance of that happening is exquisitely slim, though. I think getting the extra energy every turn is actually quite a big deal in this situation. We have a decent number of like strikes that just cost a little bit much to play, but are actually pretty good cards. I wonder if I should be exhausting like Headbutt there instead of Wound, since Wound draws me an extra card when I draw it. with Evolve. I think the argument against doing that is I have Dazed in my deck already, so I might overdraw sometimes. I also have Dead Branch. Dead Branch is another thing that can definitely make you end up with a full hand. Oh, I guess because of all the copies of Dazed that are being put in my deck, I would not only have to get like 30 flexes, but then I'd have to keep on getting flexes from the Dazed as well. I wonder if I'll have nightmares about this situation. That seems like a recurring nightmare for a Slay the Spire player that I could totally buy. Had a nightmare where I picked up that branch, but it only gave me flex every single time on every single floor. It's terrifying. So the question now is, do we wait for Exhume on feed or not? Let's check the run length. There are 18 minutes left. I'm going to guess that I do for about 3 or 4 minutes and then I get bored and stop. And see if that's true. Happy Flower probably wants to be on 1. We have an extra energy for turn 2 of the Act 4 Elite fight, I would guess. Which means that once we get feed, we have to generate Exhume. So if you don't know how this works, you can't generate cards which heal you, but you can generate Exhume. So if you have like a feed or a Reaper, you can get Exhumed to get it back multiple times, which means you can generate cards that heal you. It's just you can only find one of them, so you have to wait even longer. You can also generate powers with creative AI. Yeah, I'm definitely looking for Exhume here, aren't I? I bet I'm going to end up putting Happy Flower on the wrong number because I got so bored of this that I just like clicked on Snecko with an attack at some point and it died. So yeah, we have to find exactly Exhume with Dead Branch in order to get the feed in our exhaust pile back. And honestly, I should wait until I find an armaments as well to upgrade it. So we have to get Exhume for feed, get armaments, draw armaments and feed together, and have feed in our hand with Happy Flower on 1. I wonder how long that would take on average for all of those things to happen. Like 30 minutes? Would be just like a random guess based on my understanding of this game. Based on having done things like that before. And as your prize, you get +4 max HP, which, like, matters sometimes quite a lot. This is not something that I think is super great about Slay the Spire's design. It's also not something that bugs me so much that I don't play the game, though. In fairness. It'd be interesting if I was on like a NO streak in this run. I could imagine myself actually spending the 30 minutes for 4 max HP. That's sort of terrifying. But yeah, for the most part, I just don't care that much, so it doesn't end up being that big a deal. I like that our strength is a power of 2. One thing about playing Corruption is, please play the Fiendfire. One thing about playing Corruption is that now I'm actually running out of skills in the deck, which means at some point it's going to be down to waiting for the copies of Dazed that deck is making for me. I guess that caps us at 1 U card per turn, basically. But then skills will reroll. They're only 75 cards. So would probably only have to go through like 150 turns would be a particularly long time to go through to get both of the cards we needed. And then to draw them together, at that point we have like a more than 100 card deck. So the drawing them together part would... Oh, no, deck is dead. Yeah, I did put Happy Flower on the wrong number. Oh my god. I don't know. I find that very funny. Okay. Health had not mattered at all in that fight, and we have to rest at the campfire anyway. This is a bit of an interesting store. Definitely don't want Spoon here because it stops our cards from exhausting, and we actively want our cards to exhaust so that Dead Branch can give us something else. Removing a strike seems fine. Guess we like buy Pen Nib and Paper Frog. Can I afford both? Can't afford both. Paper Frog then? Yes. Maybe discard the Blood Potion for a Dex Potion? It's only 20% of max HP, so it's... I think this one rounds up, though. 25. I think it's just 25. That feels like it's pretty close. Oh, if I remember right, the reason I kept the Blood Potion was the fact that I could use it at the end of this fight and then get a new potion. Which, yeah, makes perfect sense. I'm pretty sure that's what I said at the time, too. This turn seems perfectly fine, and the turn sort of played itself because of how the buffer charge was set up. There wasn't really anything else I could do there, I don't think. This is a little bit interesting now. Sure, I guess so. Could have tried to more aggressively remove artifact charges from the shield, but I'm not sure it really made sense anyway. I think I was meant to spot weakness the shield to turn there, and I sort of missed it. This is a situation where, like, I have this weird thing in my brain, I think, where it's incredibly obvious to me that going for the feed is the correct play. So it's very hard for me not to do that. But when I'm in this situation with 126 HP and a super strong deck in the Act 2 Elite fight, it's not 100% obvious to me what the best play is, and I'm pretty sure that like just about anything wins the run. So it's actually way easier for me to just like play something like this carelessly and give up a bunch of HP by clicking the wrong button or whatever than it is for me to give up 3 HP by just not playing feed one time. Sort of weird how my brain works there. But it is how my brain works, I don't know. It just feels really bad to not get the feed off. And it doesn't feel that bad to me at all to make a misplay in the Guardians fight here. Not got a lot of damage scaling in this deck, huh? Our damage just doesn't pick up that quickly, other than like one spot weakness. We kill stuff pretty slow. Now, Dead Branch can help with that. We can end up getting demon forms with Dead Branch or corruptions with Dead Branch or something like that. But for the most part, so far, Dead Branch hasn't given us anything ridiculous. It's just been lots of okay value so far. Except for corruptions when the fight is already over, like here. We also got a corruption when the fight was already over against Donu Deka. Happy Flower is the only relic with a number on it that we care about between fights. Probably it should be on 1 again. The thing is, putting it on 2 when we don't get attacked or much on turn 1 in a fight doesn't do that much. If it's on 2 going into the heart fight, it's always giving us more energy on the turn where we don't get attacked. Yeah, I think 1's the right number. Feel No Pain's an excellent pickup. Dual Wield Plus would have been good there too, but I think Feel No Pain's better. And with a Feel No Pain, all of a sudden it becomes pretty hard to lose. It was already pretty hard to lose. It becomes even more hard to lose. Oh my gosh. Yeah, we won't be taking damage next turn. Did I have an armaments with a feed or something? Is that why people are talking about 1 HP? Oh no. Sure. A tricky thing in the heart fight that a lot of people don't realize is that the heart will cleanse all of the negative strength that you apply to it before it gains strength. And so on this turn, if I played the other disarm, I'd give it -6 strength overall, but it would just cleanse all of that negative strength on turn 4. So we want to hold on to the disarm, and then when it gives itself strength again, we want to remove all of its artifact charges and then disarm it a second time then. So it's a little bit more demanding of your deck's ability to draw cards at the right times over the course of the fight. You don't just get to like malaise the heart on turn 1 and then you don't have to worry about anything anymore. It's a bit more difficult than that. I would have assumed that it was right to play Battle Trance there. I would have drawn all of the cards I wanted to play and none of the statuses. That's funny. I don't have Frozen Eye, right? No. Yeah, I would have assumed that it was okay to play Barricade there. Or Battle Trance, sorry, not Barricade. Wrong word. So, we managed to draw Artifact Charge Cleansers and Disarm, just like that. Also got an Inflame for a little bit more scaling, and from here, it's very clean sailing. If you're really greedy, you can wait on Disarm, because now it has -1 strength, so it's going to cleanse another 1 extra strength. If we waited until the next time it buffed, it would have 4 strength and then go to 1, and would have it on 1 less strength for the rest of the fight. You can do that. I'm gonna point out that you can do that, but there is not often much reason to let the heart have 3 extra strength for these turns in order for it to have 1 less strength later on for those turns, at the cost of having to draw Disarm again and not play it this turn. I've had situations with like malaise and ice cream where that's been a thing though, where I've like only had 2 malaises, and so dumping them all, dumping like 1 on the first cycle of the heart and then the second on the second cycle of the heart, just leads to it removing all of the debuffs. And so instead what I've done is like let the heart build up a bit of strength after the first malaise and then played the second malaise like 6 turns later to keep the heart clamped down for a bit longer. So I guess I have had that come up before in my life. But yeah, for the most part, it's a pretty small thing. Pretty good win rate so far for VOD Review Jorbs. Was that 2 in a row? Not bad at all. Twitch Jorbs is actually better than YouTube Jorbs right now. Twitch Jorbs has a longer personal best win streak. But I guess those are all on the way to YouTube Jorb uploads, so YouTube Jorbs will be catching up soon. I hope you enjoyed this little VOD review and chat. Gave me a chance to ramble about some things that I wouldn't usually ramble about. But I don't know if that was fun for you or not. It was fun enough for me, I guess. Have a good one. I'll let you see what the score was, and then I'll let you go off to your lives. Are we gonna click the proceed button, or... I feel very debated by Past Jorbs right now. Oh, Past Jorbs is looking up the "she has ugly elbows" or whatever it's called meme. Fair enough. Ah, too far. There you go. Yeah. 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 There you go. Alright. Have a good one, everybody.